They built 50 homes on my ranch, no warning, no meeting, no apology. Just fresh asphalt poured over the soil my father bled for. Then their HOA had the nerve to fine me for trespassing on the road they carved through my land like I was some stranger who wandered in from the desert. What they didn't know was simple. The only road in and out of their perfect little neighborhood still belonged to me, and when I finally closed the gate, I watched their little empire start to crumble from my front porch. I'm Russell Merrick, and Redstone Ranch isn't just acreage on a county map, it's my family's name written into the dirt. It's my grandfather's fence posts set by hand. It's my dad teaching me to swing a hammer straight and never let a man talk you out of what's yours. I've turned down developers before slick guys with bright teeth and glossy brochures promising legacy partnerships like they were doing me a favor by trying to buy my history. I always said no. I didn't inherit this place to flip it. I inherited it to keep it, to pass it on, to make sure the land stayed honest. That's why the morning I found the fence gone, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a violation. The frost had laid a silver skin over the grass, the kind of cold that makes everything look clean and quiet, like the world's holding its breath. I was riding my mare Daisy down the southern fence line, same route I'd ridden 1,000 times, when she slowed without me asking. Ears forward, nostrils flaring, that uneasy animal sense that something's off. I slid out of the saddle boots, crunching in the frost, and walked ahead, thinking maybe a storm had knocked a section loose. Except it wasn't loose. It wasn't broken. It was gone, cleanly gone, like someone had rolled up the wire and carried it away like ribbon. And right there in the dirt were heavy equipment tracks, fresh grooves dug deep enough to hold shadow. I followed them, heart-thudding, past the cottonwoods that have been standing longer than I've been alive, past the draw where my dad and I used to spot deer at dusk, and when I crested the rise, I stopped so hard the air caught in my throat. Roofs, dozens of them. Identical tan stucco white trim, neat little driveways, mailboxes lined up like soldiers. A brand new subdivision sitting on the south end of my ranch where my cattle had grazed last summer. For a full 10 seconds my brain tried to protect me, tried to tell me I'd gotten turned around, that I'd wandered onto someone else's land. But the ridge line curved exactly the way it always had. The creek still cut its silver thread through the bottom. The old watering hole sat right where it belonged. Everything screamed the same impossible truth. Someone built a neighborhood on my property. I rode home hard, Daisy's hooves thudding like a countdown, and I yanked open the old map cabinet in my study like I was looking for oxygen. The original survey plat, thick parchment faded ink, still had my family's name on it. The southern boundary line ran straight through the heart of where those houses now stood. I pulled up the county GIS online. Same parcel number, same owner. Redstone Ranch. Russell E. Merrick. No transfer, no easement, no subdivision permit in my name. It was like I didn't exist. I called the county planning office voicemail. I called again, silence. So I sat at my kitchen table with maps spread out like a crime scene and tried to steady my hands. The next morning I rode back down for a closer look because I had to see it with my own eyes, like maybe reality would blink and fix itself. Sprinklers hissed over half-grown lawns. A woman in yoga pants unloaded groceries from a shiny SUV. Two little kids chased each other around a driveway still pale with fresh sealer. Somebody had hung a wreath on a front door like this place had always been here. And then I saw the sign at the entrance, polished metal proud letters, Sage Hollow Estates, a premier HOA community. HOA, of course, like a cherry on top of theft. I was sitting there on Daisy with the reins loose in my hands when a white golf cart rolled toward me, smooth as entitlement. A woman in a crisp red blazer drove it like she owned the road, lips pinched into that tight line people get when they've practiced being disappointed in strangers. She looked me up and down, dusty boots, ranch jacket, hat, and said, "You're not allowed to be here. This is private property." I remember how calm my voice sounded, even though my pulse was punching my ribs. "I know," I said. "It's my private property." She blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language. "That's impossible," she said, and then she laughed sharp like I was a joke. "Sage Hollow is fully approved by the county. We have jurisdiction." I tipped my hat because manners cost me nothing and asked, "And your name is?" She lifted her chin. "Karen Delaney, president of the Sage Hollow Homeowners Association." Of course it was Karen. Of course she was the kind of woman who says president like it's a royal title. I said, "Well, Ms. Delaney, you might want to gather whatever paperwork you think you have, because come Monday we're going to have a very interesting conversation at the recorder's office." She laughed louder. "We have attorneys, Mr. Merrick," I said. "Russell Merrick." She smiled like she'd just won. "You'll be hearing from them." "Good," I told her, and I rode away with a cold certainty settling in my gut. Monday morning I walked into the county recorder's office at sunrise boots, echoing in that waxed hallway that smells like old paper and quiet power. I asked for my parcel Southern Quadrant, the one my father rezoned decades ago. The clerk pulled it up, frowned, and turned the screen toward me. The overlay showed Sage Hollow plotted into 50 neat lots with recent transfer dates. But beneath that glossy digital layer, the original deed chain stayed unbroken, still bearing my family's name like a scar that wouldn't heal. No final subdivision approval. Missing signatures. Permits approved by a temporary planner who'd already resigned. It wasn't sloppy. It was arrogant. It was someone betting I'd never notice or I'd be too quiet to fight. I walked out with a thick folder of prints and made one call from the parking lot, Brenda Molina, land use attorney, 30 years of turning rich people's arrogance into ash. She answered like she'd been waiting. "I drove past that new subdivision last week," she said, "and thought no way in hell they built that without stepping on your toes." "They didn't step," I told her. "They paved the whole damn thing." She let out a low whistle. "You've got surveys." "Original plat, my dad's revisions, fresh county pull." A pause. Then the sound of a lighter, Brenda's tell. "Then we've got them dead to rights," she said. "But be careful. HOA presidents get twitchy when the real owner walks through their plastic paradise." That afternoon I walked Sage Hollow on foot, hands in pockets, trying not to look like a man staring at his own stolen memories. Every house felt like an insult built in beige. I stopped at Lot 19 because the porch sat exactly where my father and I built a 3-sided cattle shelter when I was 14. I could still feel the hammer bites in my palms, hear my dad's quiet grunt when the last board went up. Now there was a welcome mat that said, "Live, laugh, love," like the universe was mocking me. A woman stepped out, phone to her ear, and asked, polite but wary, "Can I help you?" I said, "Just walking the old fence line." Her brow furrowed. "This is HOA property." I smiled without humor. "In a way, I'm the oldest resident you've got." I didn't blame her. She looked like someone who'd bought a dream and didn't know the foundation was rotten. As I circled back toward the entrance, something clicked into place. One smooth 2-lane access road curved through the canyon and connected the whole neighborhood to the county road. It used to be an old cattle trail. Now it was paved, striped vinyl, and every inch of it crossed my land. No recorded easement, no permission. A single vein feeding their entire community, and it ran through my ranch like a knife. Brenda met me the next day, and we walked straight into the HOA clubhouse, fake stone veneer, oversized glass doors, an American flag hung crooked like an afterthought. Karen was inside, pointing at a glossy aerial map like she was briefing troops. Brenda introduced herself, laid certified deeds on the table, explained calm and lethal that Sage Hollow was occupying and governing land it did not legally own. Karen slammed down her laminated HOA plat like it was scripture. Brenda studied it, then raised an eyebrow. "This places your development in a parcel that doesn't match county records," she said. "Also, your access road slices across Mr. Merrick's property with no easement filed." Karen's cheeks flushed. "You can't barge in here and declare ownership." I finally spoke. "I don't have to declare it. I've held it for 40 years. You just built on it without asking." Karen hissed, "This is harassment." Brenda didn't even blink. This is notice. 24 hours to produce documentation of transfer or easement. If you can't, we pursue an injunction." Karen leaned back, arms crossed. "You're bluffing." Brenda slid the 1963 deed forward. "Here's the bluff." We walked out and Brenda said, "She won't back down. She'll panic. And panic makes people sloppy." That afternoon, Karen proved it. She left me a letter under my ranch gate, accusing me of unlawfully entering Sage Hollow property, threatening legal action for trespass. I read it twice, then laughed out loud under the wide sky because there's something so surreal about being told you're trespassing on the same ground your grandfather broke with a team of mules. Brenda loved it. Every time she puts that lie in writing, she said she builds our case for us. The next day, a contractor crew showed up at the canyon mouth with steel gate sections and orange cones trying to install their own barrier on my land to lock me out. That's when my anger turned sharp enough to cut. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and Deputy Rick rolled up young guy I'd known since he was a kid at cattle auctions. I handed him my deed survey's photos. Rick looked at the foreman and said, "Pack it up." 20 minutes later, the crew was gone. Karen arrived just in time to see her little coup fail. She marched at Rick like she could order the county around. "This is HOA business," she snapped. Rick stayed calm. "Not on land you don't own. No easement filed. You want to argue, do it in court." Karen's face went red hot. "This isn't over." I tipped my hat. "No, ma'am. It's only getting started." That night I sat at my kitchen table staring at maps until my eyes burned, and for the first time since this began, something heavy cracked inside me, not anger, not pride. Doubt. Because those houses weren't empty. I'd seen kids on scooters. I'd seen a mother unloading groceries. I'd heard a dog barking behind a fence that used to be mine. And there I was, a rancher with a folder of proof, and a lifetime of stubbornness about to drop a legal hammer that could crush people who didn't swing the first punch. I remember thinking maybe I should just take a check. Maybe I should let the lawyers handle it quietly. Maybe I'm the bad guy in someone else's story. I could already hear the headlines, "Stubborn Rancher Holds Families Hostage." I stared out the window toward the canyon where Sage Hollow's lights glittered like a careless constellation, and for a minute, I felt tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes. The kind that comes from realizing the world can be stolen in broad daylight if the thieves wear clean clothes and carry clipboards. I thought about my father, how he kept every boundary survey in a cabinet like it was a family Bible, how he used to say, "Sun parasites always need a vein. Remember that trail? One day, somebody will try to claim it." He wasn't a cruel man, my dad, but he was a fair one. And fairness doesn't mean rolling over. Fairness means drawing the line where it belongs and holding it there. That's the moment I found my reason to stand up, not to punish families, but to stop the lie. To force the truth into the sunlight where it couldn't be laughed off by a woman in a red blazer. 2 days later, Karen escalated again, this time with a ridiculous HOA notice of infractions listing violations like interference with HOA governance, aggressive conduct, and a total fine that looked like she'd typed it while shaking with rage. $14,000. For me, the legal owner, because I put up a no trespassing sign on my own land. That's when my doubt burned away. Not because I stopped caring about innocent people, but because Karen made it clear she didn't care about anyone but control. Brenda filed our complaint in Superior Court and pushed for emergency relief. Meanwhile, I drafted my own notice and taped it to the HOA clubhouse door. Cease and desist unauthorized development. No easement. No permission continued. Violation will result in physical restriction of access. Karen called me before I reached my truck, voice tight with fake civility. Posting threats is inappropriate. Remove it or we'll report vandalism. I said I posted a legal notice on property I own. Have your attorneys call Brenda. She's expecting them. She hung up. That night, my trail cameras caught 2 men in business casual creeping along my fence with flashlights and clipboards like they were measuring how far they could push. The next morning, a Denver law firm sent a cease and desist accusing me of harassment and unlawful interference. Brenda laughed so hard I could hear it through the phone. "They're flailing," she said. "Perfect. We go on a fence. And then I did the thing they never saw coming. I called an old friend, Mac Hadley, retired welder, the kind of man who can build a gate strong enough to stop a bull and still make it look like it belongs in the landscape. 14-foot swing gate, I told him. Heavy pipe reinforced posts set in concrete. I want it mean." Mac chuckled. "Mean I can do." By sundown, the gate stood black and tall across that paved road like a sentence with a period at the end. I hung a simple metal sign, "Private Property. Road closed to unauthorized traffic. Trespassers prosecuted." Then I parked my truck near the approach and watched the sky go dark. Dawn came crisp and bright. At 6:15, a silver sedan rolled up, headlights sweeping across the chain and padlock, then stopped like the driver hit an invisible wall. He sat there a second, maybe hoping the gate would magically open if he stared hard enough, then made a slow 3-point turn and drove away. 15 minutes later, a pickup tried to skirt the gate through the wash, bogged down in sand tires, spinning helplessly until the driver cursed and called a tow. By 8 o'clock, there were cars stacked in confusion, people on phones, snapping pictures, waving up toward my ridge like I was the neighborhood wizard who controlled reality. My phone started ringing. HOA office, Karen's cell, City Public Works. I let them all go to voicemail because if you've spent weeks laughing at a man's paperwork, you don't get instant access to his mercy. At 10:03, Karen arrived in a black Escalade, stepping out in pressed slacks and a navy coat, hair pulled tight like she was trying to keep her world from unraveling. She stared at the gate like it offended her personally, then shouted up the slope, "You can't do this. This is not a private road. It's the only access for an entire community." I walked down, slow boots crunching on frost-stiff grass, and stopped on my side of the fence line. "It's private," I said, calm enough to scare her. "Always has been. No easement ever filed. You're welcome to check the records." She snapped. "We have rights of access. People live here, families, children, essential workers." I nodded. "You have the right to live where you bought. You just don't have the right to cross my land to get there without permission." Her face flushed. "This is criminal endangerment. You're trapping people." I lifted the folder in my hand. "Deeds, surveys, filings. This is documentation," I said. "Certified, recorded, and legal." She gripped her steering wheel like she wanted to strangle it. "We'll have the sheriff here within the hour." I said, "I hope he brings coffee. It's cold." Deputy Rick did show up. Same tan cruiser crunching gravel, same calm eyes. He reviewed the paperwork again and told Karen, "Ma'am, the road sits on his deeded property. No recorded easement. He's within his rights to restrict access. If you think otherwise, file in civil court." Karen's mouth actually opened and closed like a fish. She looked from Rick to me, and I saw it, the first real crack in her certainty. That's when she tried the classic Karen move, the one they always reach for when their authority fails bargaining. "What do you want, Merrick? Money?" "An apology." "Name your price." I stared at her, and my voice dropped. "I want what was taken returned. I want the truth told. And I want you to stop acting like bylaws make you a god." She drove off throwing gravel, and by afternoon the news vans arrived, cameras pointed at my gate like it was a crime scene. They framed it the way media loves stubborn cowboy versus helpless families. They didn't talk about forged plats. They didn't talk about missing easements. They didn't mention the HOA fining the rightful landowner. But the internet did. The story spread, and inside Sage Hollow, panic spread faster. Social media pages that used to argue about lawn height turned into war zones. People demanded answers. Someone started a petition for Karen's resignation. Someone else asked if title insurance covers being landlocked by the actual owner, which, honestly, I would have laughed if it didn't make my stomach twist. Monday morning, Brenda and I stood in court with everything original deed survey seals, photographs showing pasture turning into foundations like a time-lapse nightmare. The judge listened, flipped pages, frowned deeper with every exhibit. When Brenda explained assumed consent post-construction, the judge actually said out loud, "That's not how property law works." He signed the emergency order, temporary injunction, my right to restrict access, affirmed pending full hearing, essential services allowed under supervision, everything else denied. I drove back to the gate holding that injunction like a key made of paper and authority. I replaced my simple sign with a metal plaque engraved with the case number, because if Karen wanted to play paperwork games, fine. Let's play with the kind that has a judge's signature on it. That night, Karen held an emergency HOA meeting, and one of the residents, Dean, a guy from Lot 12 who'd been quietly reaching out, sent me shaky video. The clubhouse was packed, voices overlapping, people furious. "You told us everything was clear. My husband can't get home. I have a doctor's appointment." Karen stood up front, blazer rumpled, trying to blame administrative oversights like this was a typo on a grocery list. But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. And for the first time the power shifted, not because I raised my voice, not because I threatened anyone, but because truth has weight, and once you drop it on a lie, the lie starts to crack. The main hearing came 3 weeks later, and the courtroom looked like a county fair. Reporters, residents, lawyers in expensive shoes. Karen took the stand wearing pearls and wounded dignity eyes glossy like she'd practiced in a mirror. "I only wanted a safe, beautiful community," she said. "Mr. Merrick's actions have terrified families." Brenda stood up slow and asked questions like a surgeon cutting clean. "Did you review a title report? No. Did you contact Mr. Merrick for an easement? No. Yet you fined him $14,000 for walking on land you never owned." Karen's voice thinned. "That was standard procedure." Brenda held up the forged plat map and said, "Standard fraud objection. Overruled." And then the judge ruled from the bench, voice steady, unimpressed. The evidence showed the defendants developed and governed private property without legal authority. The HOA's actions against me were null and void. My right to restrict access was affirmed, their counterclaims were dismissed. I didn't smile. I didn't pump a fist. I just breathed like a man who'd been holding his breath since the morning he saw roofs where grass should have been. Outside microphones got shoved toward my face. "Will you evict the residents? Will you demand demolition?" I looked at the nearest camera and said, "No. I never wanted to punish families who bought in good faith. I wanted the theft to stop and the lies exposed. Today the court confirmed my rights. The rest will settle fairly." That night Karen resigned. Not a dramatic press conference, not a brave speech, just a message, a scramble, a vote, and suddenly the woman who'd strutted around in a red blazer like she owned my land was gone. Dean called me voice raw with exhaustion and relief. "It's over," he said. "The old board is out. We're done fighting you. We want to negotiate in good faith." I stared out over the canyon at the identical roofs, the road, the gate, and the land underneath it all, my land still mine in the only place that mattered, the record, the truth, the boundary line that never moved, no matter how loud Karen got. I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded, like the earth under my boots finally recognized me again. And that's the lesson, plain and simple. Never confuse a clipboard and a set of bylaws with the right to steal what isn't yours.